In this video, I'm going to give you 5 excellent podcast episodes to listen to help you find the perfect job. These episodes include people who are extremely intelligent. They talk about their journeys and their careers and how in the modern world you can find the right job for you. These podcast episodes are aimed at people who are still trying to find their path and still exploring and still learning about what it is they want to do and build a career out of. I'll put all the links in the video description. They'll be to the Spotify links, but you can also find these episodes on Apple Music and YouTube as well. The Perils of Following Your Career Passion. This is taken from the podcast series Work Life with Adam Grant. And Adam Grant is an organizational psychologist, which means that he studies the workplace and what motivates people in the workplace and how company structure can influence the way that companies operate. He writes and talks about careers quite a bit, and he's someone I've listened to a lot over the years. He's really inspirational. And in this podcast, he talks about how following your passions that we often develop in childhood is not necessarily a great thing to do. For me, I wanted to be a footballer for most of my childhood, and that kind of motivated me to do a lot of things, and it actually motivated me to end up being a football coach for a little bit. And that was a really good decision because I learned a lot, but actually I realized that football for me was just something that I really enjoyed doing. It wasn't something that I wanted to build a career out of. But it might have been smarter for me to actually follow something that made more sense as a career or made more sense for me. Following football was more just like scratching an itch that I had to kind of get rid of because I just wanted to know if working in football was something that I could do. There's so many things that you can't expect about a job, like the lifestyle, the pay, the location, the hours that you have to work. Those are things that you don't often think about when you consider the actual job itself or your passion and like what that will look like as a job in real life. So what he recommends doing is following your interests and exploring new things and trying to find a deeper meaning in your 20s that you can then pursue as a career. How to land your perfect job. So this podcast episode is taken from the podcast Boss Babe, and the guest is Victoria Young. Victoria Young has worked for Uber, Facebook, and Netflix, and in the podcast they talk about her career journey, very specifically like the interviews she went through, how she prepared for the interviews, the actual tasks and activities that she did in each of those jobs, like the questions that she asked herself about her career. It's really useful insight, someone who's like further down the line into how they thought about building their career and the actions that they took to get there. How to reach your full potential. This podcast is taken from The Diary of a CEO, which is one of my absolute favorite podcasts with Stephen Bartlett, and his guest is Matthew Syed. Matthew Syed was a former British table tennis player, and he's now an author and a mindset expert. They talk about loads of really important things in this episode. One of them is the growth mindset. The growth mindset is where you understand that to learn and to improve, you have to fail and make mistakes. A fixed mindset is where you think you have a fixed potential. This episode is all about how you actually don't know what your potential is until you really apply yourself to something. You have to be willing to fail though and to learn. Another important thing they talk about is having ideas and taking action. Everyone can have ideas and everyone can come up with business ideas or things they want to do, but it's another thing to take action and actually act on the thing. The conversation between Matthew and Stephen is just so interesting, and it really inspires you to open yourself up to failure and to try and explore new things to help you find the right career. The science behind career success. So this is from my favorite YouTuber, who I obviously couldn't leave out of a YouTube video, Ali Abdaal, and he's talking to Grace Lorden, who is a behavioral science professor at the London School of Economics. And in this episode, she talks about how you can build a career that you want and a life that you want by thinking big and taking small steps. She has a book by the same name, which I'm reading, but I actually think that this podcast episode is a more efficient way of getting the information that she has, which is basically around visualizing what are the tasks and the activities that you want to be doing in the future and taking small steps every day to get closer to that future. It's a really interesting conversation. She has a lot to offer around like tangible insights into what we should be doing to get closer to the future that we want. The power of knowing what you don't know. This podcast episode is taken from Brené Brown's podcast called Dare to Lead. And again, we've got Adam Grant. So Brené Brown is similar. She's like a researcher and an author. And the conversation they have is so amazing because they're both such interesting thinkers. They're so humble and willing to learn and to challenge themselves and each other. They talk about their careers and how they ended up doing the things they do now. And it's not so much like specifically about careers, but I think this podcast is so valuable because it's about challenging your own beliefs and challenging what you think might be the best thing for you. One of the things that appears in this episode that also appears in the one with Stephen and Matthew is around thinking like a scientist, being willing to experiment both with yourself and with your work and your career, and evaluating the outcomes and making decisions based off that. I would say Brené Brown and Adam Grant are two of the people you need to listen to most and read about most if you want to learn more about careers and society and how to think about yourself and how to think in general. The bonus episode is from Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast, and it's 10 minutes long, and it's him talking to college students in the US and university students in the UK about what to do after leaving college. His main point is that in your 20s, when you have no risk, you have no responsibility, you should be learning and exploring. And that is something that is like at the center of all of this. We have time in our 20s. We should be optimizing for learning and exploring instead of optimizing for earning money. We can do that in our 30s and our 40s. He's really big on emphasizing that you realize how young you are. When you're 40 or you're 45, you still feel young. You still feel like you've got time ahead of you in your career. You can just afford to take the time in your 20s to learn about yourself. Those are all the podcasts, and I guarantee you, if you listen to all of them, you will feel better and clearer about your life and your job and your career and what your purpose is, because these people are very intelligent people who have thought about all of these things very deeply, and they're now relaying their experiences and their research. So give them a listen. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're thinking about what to do with your life, you might enjoy this video here about how to figure out what to do with your life, and also this video here about how I stay on top of my life, the Sunday night review, which is something I do every Sunday night. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you got some value, and I'll see you in the next one.